The Witcher is one of Netflix's most fun new shows, but it's not one of their most straightforward. But I refuse to be bamboozled. This is probably the actual timeline of events in The Witcher Season 1. So the good news is that Princess Cirilla's timeline is easy to figure out. She lives in the present, so almost everything that happens in the show comes before the story of her flight from Sintra. Ciri's story takes place over about a week at the end of Geralt's timeline and overlaps with the end of Yen's, and that's about it. The bad news is that everything else in this show is a mess because no one on The Witcher ages at all. Let's start with Geralt. It's clear that his timeline skips forward several times over Season 1, but how many years does this season actually cover in his life? The key to answering that question comes from another character with a much better defined lifetime, Queen Calanthe of Sintra. In episode 1, Ciri says that her grandma Calanthe won her first battle when she was Ciri's age. Later in that episode, but earlier in the timeline, Renfri tells Geralt that Calanthe recently won that same battle, putting the start of Geralt's adventures in whatever year Calanthe was as young as Ciri is at that banquet. Ciri is 11 in The Witcher. We know this because Geralt came back for her 12 years after he walked out on Pavetta's first trimester. So that makes Queen Calanthe 11 at the time of her first battle, in the same year that Geralt meets Renfri in Blaviken. Let's call that first year in Geralt's timeline Year 1. Calanthe's daughter Pavetta's betrothal is the second touchpoint in Calanthe and Geralt's timeline. Calanthe is eager to marry Pavetta off and brings up her own early marriage at the ball, so it's logical to assume Pavetta is set to be a youngish bride. The Witcher books place her age at 15, which tracks for the Netflix show as well. If Calanthe was 15 when she was married, and her daughter Pavetta was born relatively quickly after her mother's marriage, that would make Calanthe 31 years old, and place the ball in episode 4 at year 20 in Geralt's timeline. We already know that Geralt stays away from Sintra for 12 years, putting Geralt's meeting with Ciri in year 32, and confining his Season 1 adventures to a period of 3 decades and 2 years. And he doesn't age at all over the course of them. Okay, getting into Yen. Yen's story is much, much harder to parse. We don't know how old she was when she went to Aretuza, or how long she was there, and the only hard clue we have for her timeline is that she served at the court of Aedirn for 30 years before becoming an independent sorceress. Drawing the timeline tighter around her requires a deeper dive, involving the Kingdom of Nilfgaard, and Jaskier the Bard for some reason. In episode 3, Yen was almost assigned to King Fergus of Nilfgaard, but conspired instead to serve King Verferil of Aedirn. That means King Fergus was still in power when Yen ascended, so her 30-year countdown to independence starts somewhere during his reign. Geralt meets Triss Merigold, a recent Aretuza graduate, who tells him King Fergus of Nilfgaard has been murdered and usurped. Triss also later recognizes Yen in episode 7, suggesting that Yen was still a member of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers when Triss was at Aretuza and when Fergus was usurped, somewhere between Geralt's year 1 and his year 20. Geralt met Jaskier the Bard before Fergus was usurped and has been his friend for 10 years when he meets Yen. Yen is already an independent sorceress when she meets the boys, which means she left the Brotherhood in the years between Fergus's usurpation in episode 3 and Jaskier and Geralt's 10-year friendiversary in episode 5. Counting back 30 years from any date in that time overlaps with Geralt's year 1, cementing the fact that Yen's ascension at Aretuza takes place 20 to 25 years before Geralt even travels to Blaviken in episode 1. Guys, Yen is old as balls. Since Geralt and Ciri are together by the end of Season 1, and Yen isn't far away in Sodden, perhaps The Witcher Season 2 won't have to do as much timey-wimey stuff to get all of their stories into a short 8 hours. If not, toss a coin to your Mashable writers who spent a week stringing all of this together on a giant fantasy-themed conspiracy board.